PixMix is brought to you by the Arun and Show, broadcasting on Liberated Syndication on youtube.com/Arun and Show, and is in association with the Old School Lane podcast.
PixMix is brought to you by oldschoollane.blogspot.com and is associated with the Arun and Show.
Welcome to PixMix with Arun
and Patricia.
Hey Patricia, what's up?
Not much, especially since we're going to be going sky high all the way up into the tropics, but seriously, right before we do discuss about our today's episode of PixMix with our movie, I just need to let you know about the Incredibles 2 trailer, and it was amazing.
Oh, well, it was. I tell you what, I'm really glad that they're going in the direction that I thought they were going to go in, and the Incredibles 2 now is definitely on the forefront of everybody's minds. Without any doubt whatsoever, and I like the idea that they're going on the. We knew this from the beginning anyway, that Elastigirl was going to be somewhat the central focus of this, and trying to basically reignite her old ways as Elastigirl. And I really like the idea that now we're going to have we have Bob as the stay-at-home dad. And
I'm not even joking when I'll tell you this, but a lot of people have been posting online saying that, Mr. Incredible has become Mr. Mom if he had superpowers.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, though, I think I will err on the side of caution, though, in regards to how they might go with this, because, we already have kind of like a series of kind of like, the stay-at-home dads, in a way, and I think the latest one was like something, it had like John Cena in it or something like that, and some of the other, wasn't there like a movie that was out recently that had kind of like, the stereotypical dads you see in movies?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I think, hopefully they're gonna do something. I mean, this is a family with superpowers, so I think maybe they can do something really cool with it already.
Yeah, so that'd be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'll safely say this: it's gonna be better than the reboot trailer.
Oh my! I know. Everybody's been talking about it, saying like it's like Code Lyoko if it was crap.
It's basically there's something people have been calling it to Super Ninja Team or something like that, or some kind of crazy
There's
show.
Like insert Ninja Team, insert Super Squad, insert Code Lyoko. A lot of people are not happy about it.
Anyway, we're drifting away from our topic.
That's okay. Oh, I see what you did there.
So let's drift our way back into it, shall we?
All right, let's do this.
This movie is interesting because I think it garners very different responses. For me, Up is a very fun, very adventurous movie, but at the same time, I can kind of understand some people's complaints about it.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people have mixed reactions to it, very similar to how they feel about WALL-E, in which some people really love this movie from beginning to end, while some people only like some parts of it more than others.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to talk about WALL-E at some point in the future, but I mean, compared to WALL-E, I mean, at least there was half a movie, at least you can, say was pitch perfect, but in this... let's all talk about it. So, before we actually get into the movie itself, we have to address some confusion in this, because let me safely say this about, and by the confusion, I mean I'm talking about the what type of short you got, because I'm going to say that the Pixar short that I got when I first watched Up was one called Partly Cloudy. Now, some people will say, oh yeah, Partly Cloudy, and other people will say, what? Partly Cloudy? What's that? And the reason why some people react like that is because some people may have watched it on television and did not get the short. Some people might have got the Blu-ray and DVD special and didn't get Partly Cloudy. And some people might have downloaded the iTunes version and got a completely different short altogether. So that's basically right off the bat, we have confusion. So let me safely say this. I've seen Partly Cloudy, but I've got to be honest with everybody, I've not seen the Doug's First Special Mission exclusive that comes on the Blu-ray and DVD, and because I haven't downloaded the iTunes version, I've not seen George and AJ. So
yeah, I haven't seen either of those either.
Yeah, so I guess let's stick with what we know, and we're going to address which we believe is the animated short that came with our film, which is Partly Cloudy. Which, if I give a brief description, is basically is voiced by Peter Sohn, who is basically the voice of Emile from Ratatouille, and he also makes his directorial debut in the film. So, after a long success, cheerful cloud people in the sky might make cute, cuddly little babies, and also cute human boys and girls, kittens, puppies, and everything else you can name, and give them to storks for the delivery of expectant parents. I was like, is this the origin story to Dumbo?
You know, it's funny because echo again. How many times? This is going to be a recurring thing in the show, I swear.
Yeah, I think it is, but you're not echoing for me, so.
Oh well. Okay, there we go. Much better. Yes. Apparently, the person who did create the short was heavily inspired by Dumbo because he used to watch it a lot when he was a kid, and so that's where the whole concept of clouds forming animals and then the storks taking them to their moms and their dads. So yeah, it was heavily inspired by Dumbo.
Mm-hmm. And so, basically, there is a delivery stork named Peck, and he basically gets the worst of it because there is a big dark cloud called Gus, who exactly doesn't make cute animals. Instead, he makes crocodiles, bighorn sheep, porcupines, baby sharks, basically the kind of, the kids that only your father would love, basically, or a mother would love.
Yeah, it's like the equivalent of if you have a doctor or you have a hand nurse, and then they're delivering the babies, and some cases it's like the baby's crying, the baby's throwing a tantrum, the baby is peeing on your face. And then there's babies who are like cute and they're sleeping and they're like sucking their thumbs. But yeah, there's cases like that. And we feel really sad for Peck because he's getting injured every time Gus makes an animal. And you can see that Gus is not doing this out of being nasty. He's just doing this because that's what he does, and he's just doing this out of love. And then he feels really bad for Peck, and as time goes on, Peck wants to go away from Gus and he wants to go over to another cloud who could make him a nice animal. And then they kind of have like a little understanding towards one another, and Peck is able to wear like a little helmet so he can protect himself if an animal attacks him, and they start having this little friendship towards one another.
Yeah. Do you know what? Here's the thing, though. This is actually one of the very few shorts that I would actually like to see more of. Like, wouldn't this be kind of fun if it was like, like a little TV special? Like, so you get to kind of develop the characters a little bit, and like, how did they meet? Why does Peck do what he does? I mean, why does Gus do what he does? Kind of like go delve a little bit deeper into it. Really, that'd be kind of nice if we ever saw that.
That'd be interesting. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I mean, that was the short that we got, and I tell you what, it was a good throw off. I think, if you think about it, because, they first showed some clouds, which made you think, oh, we're going to go straight into Up. And it's like, no, we're going to go into a shot called Partly Cloudy, which, is, I said before that it's kind of nice. Remember when I talked about bounding? Like it was like a nice different thing before, we got into the the meat, the meat of the presentation, which was obviously the Pixar film. So yeah. I mean, yeah, this was a bit, I don't know. It just, I can see what they were kind of going for there, but in a way, I kind of like my shorts to be kind of different in front of Pixar films, really. So this to me kind of felt like, okay, at least they did something different with it. But it would have been nice if they had like a more broader theme, I think, for the short, rather than kind of like going for like, oh, there's something in the sky. Which we're already going to go into later on in the show. So
Sure, like something completely different than what we would be expected to see. Like when we talked about The Incredibles, we talked about the one with the sheep. When we were talking about Good Dinosaur, we were talking about Sanjay's super team. They were all completely different. For some people, they like to see they have a contrast to watching a short, and then they would go over to seeing the movie, and then it's something completely different. And for some cases, the short and the movie are entertaining in their own separate ways. Sometimes, like Sanjay's super team and the Good Dinosaur, the short is the highlight of the entire presentation.
hmm So let's get into Up, which I believe is a very delightful film. And so we'll start from the beginning. So in
AKA the best part of the movie.
maybe yeah, the first 12 minutes that many people care about the most. In his youth, age 9, Carl Frederickson is the fan of Charles F. Muntz, who piloted his own self-made dirigible known as the Spirit of Adventure. One day, while running down a sidewalk, he pretending to be the pilot of his balloon, a regular blue balloon with a word Spirit Adventure written on the side. Carl hears a voice coming from the dilapidated house, and curious about it, Carl enters the house and meets Ellie. And one thing I noticed that, within the notes is that it actually does kind of miss out the the not the monologue. I mean, kind of like the what's it called? Is it the epilogue? I guess you could say that we get with at the beginning of the film, because it sets up Carl Frederickson where he is basically in his youth, and then he introduces us to Charles F. Muntz. And
Right,
so basically,
right. We do get little breadcrumbs as to what would be featured in the movie. We have Charles M. Muntz, we have Carl meeting up with Ellie, we have the book of thinking about, oh, I want to go into a whole bunch of places all over the world, and I want to go exploring. I want to create memories. And both of them, they are huge fans of Muntz. They're explorers, they love adventuring, and so they have that bond, which basically carries them throughout their childhood and adult years.
yeah. So it's great setup, to say the least. So kudos for doing that. And so then we get the meeting between Carl and Ellie, which I have to say is quite sweet, because Carl doesn't know exactly what to make of Ellie to begin with, and then Ellie, you can see he's starting to take a commanding role in between the two of them. And so Ellie starts Startling's introduction, of course, is Carl to release his balloon, and he gets stuck in the attic. With Ellie's encouragement, she tries to get it back by crossing the wooden single plank across the second floor of the house. However, the wooden plank breaks, and Carl ends up breaking his arm. So that's that's the introduction to that. And so they obviously get we also go into the beginning of the montage, which is showing Carl and Ellie's relationship starting to build up. And I don't know, do you think they kind of went a bit too quick? I think with the relationship, do you think, because they showed him off as kids, and then all of a sudden there's a balloon popping, and all of a sudden they're married? Like,
yeah, I wish that there would have been a little bit more build up into their relationship. Like maybe we would have seen them as like older kids, then maybe as teenagers, and then eventually as young adults. But I guess because the main focus is about, Carl as an old man, and then eventually, the balloons go up into the air, and then the house is floating. I guess they wanted to focus more on that. I mean, who knows? Maybe, there was like a rewrite into that, because to be quite honest, when looking at the trailers, the only thing that I did see was the house and the balloons. That was like the main thing that was attracting the trailers and the posters and all that stuff. So, I mean, I guess it would be really nice if, we would have gotten a little bit more detail about their relationship. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, here's the thing as well. It's like, out of think about this for a second. We've got this story set up, and we pretty much skipped over I'd say a good decent amount of the story, which is, Carl and Ellie getting together, and then getting married, and then, obviously going on having this life together, and that basically makes up the first 12 minutes of the film. Don't you think that commands more of a prequel than Monsters University?
Yes, absolutely. Because, oh man, when we get to Monsters University, I have a huge rant about that movie. Like, that movie seriously does not need to exist as a prequel. Oh man, but
Yeah.
seriously, stuff like this, it deserves to have a prequel. Toy Story deserves to have a prequel. The Incredibles deserve to have a prequel. You can argue Finding Nemo deserves to have a prequel,
Mm.
not Monsters Inc.
Yeah, and so because I mean we'll move on to Monsters University at some point, but so yeah, I mean I would like to see a prequel with Ellie and Ellie and Carl, talking about how maybe they can even do the setup because obviously when they go through the montage. And they go through all sorts of things. Ellie becomes a tour guide at the zoo, and Carlos becomes a balloon salesman. And they work side by side for the majority of pretty much all their lives. And then they decide they want to have children. Then Ellie finds out she's infertile, and I tell you what, that is the buzzkill of basically that part of the first act of the film.
Absolutely. Like, for example, I know somebody who has Turner syndrome, and Turner syndrome. It's very difficult for you to get pregnant. So I knew somebody who has that, and she said, I relate to her so much.
And so here's the thing that I don't want to come across as insensitive, with this, because I know this is probably, it's very devastating for Ellie. And I'm sure any woman who finds herself infertile. But wasn't adoption an option?
I guess, but maybe it was possible maybe during that time. I mean, we don't even know what time period it takes place in. So maybe there was not a lot of options, or maybe like she was so devastated. Like we did see earlier in the movie about how she was so devastated. And then Carl decides, hey, why don't we start saving up money so we can go over to Paradise Falls? And so that becomes like their main thing. And then eventually, as maybe time goes on, then, we have a whole bunch of stuff happening, like the car breaks down, a tree falls down in their house, and they start like having to spend money on their dream trip to Paradise Falls. And then as time goes on, they start getting older and older, and maybe at that point it was already too late.
Yeah, funny enough, I've seen actually fan fictions of like what ifs, and like so I guess people were so so taken back, I think, about Ellie not being able to have children, that the people started writing fan fictions about it, saying that what if she could have children, which isn't canon. I know fan fiction isn't canon, but
sure. And I also have another explanation. Like for example, I used to know a couple who were like in their 40s and they never had kids. And the reason why is because they were teachers and they were surrounded by students. They would come by, like after school to their place for studying, homework, or maybe like for activities like, going, outside and having like scavenger hunts and hiking, and even sometimes for dinner. So their children were the students that they would have teaching. One of them was like a general teacher, and the other one was a fitness instructor. And so for the longest time, they were teachers. They were like teachers for like, I would say like almost 15 years. And they didn't have children because they didn't want to take away the time that they had for, helping out the school, the students, I meant. And then eventually, they started traveling a lot, and they, did a lot of activities together. So that could be also another option about like, they go to they work at a zoo. And at the zoo, there's a lot of kids there, especially since Carl sells balloons. So maybe they, put a lot of focus on entertaining the kids at the zoo, and then they try focusing on raising money for Paradise Falls so they can go out and travel and have adventures together. That could also be another, theory on why they never adopted.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, it would have been, here's a chance to do a prequel for Rob, and, there's a story there, at least, many stories you can stick into a prequel for
Sure.
Rob.
Yeah. And maybe, who knows, maybe if they ever do a prequel on, like, the Disney Channel or Toon Disney or anything like that, maybe they will write in, like, a kid character, like a neighbor or something that, Carl and Ellie like befriended and then, helped raise a little bit or something. And then, he kind of like moves on, because later on in the movie, I'm sure we'll be discussing about this a little later, but I think that, the way that they treated kids at the zoo, and at some point when Carl treats one of the kids that we'll talk about a little later, that's definitely apparent that they would have been nice with kids.
Yeah. Just as long as they don't, add like the kid character, kind of just to and just make him like really annoying. like kind of like a
man,
kind of like the kind of like kid out of Indiana Jones, kind of like
oh yeah, Short Round. Yeah, it's actually funny because that guy, the actor who plays a Short Round, he's actually going to be visiting Florida SuperCon, and I'm like, oh, this will be interesting to meet up with him. Okie dokie, Mr. Jones.
Okay. Where were we?
Up.
Oh, okay. So, they're getting to their retirement age, and so Carl and Ellie are growing old together, and so they working at the zoo selling balloons and giving tours still. And then Carl notices that during their retirement phase, he'd completely forgotten about the trip, sorry, and decided to basically took the get the savings jar out of the way, and then start going for the trip. So Carl then goes to buy the tickets for the Paradise Falls, presumably with the retirement money. And but unfortunately, when Ellie and them are on a picnic, he brings the tickets with them. But while they were climbing the hill, she collapses and ends up in hospital. So then we have the sad moments of when they say goodbye to each other, and Ellie dies in hospital. And so it becomes very depressing at this point, to say the least.
Yeah, it's very depressing. It makes you feel really sad, and it's very justified on Carl's character as a grumpy old man because he has nobody else. He has no other family members. His only companion is dead, and he has no kids. And so he's basically just all by himself in his house. And, we see throughout the beginning of the movie, like after the montage is over. So we have him, sitting down in one of those chairs that brings you up and down the stairs because, you can't do it. You can't go up the stairs anymore because you're old. And, it's playing the song of Carmen while this other shorter montage is happening. So while he's, getting, his breakfast and he's checking on the mail, then we see that his entire neighborhood is under construction and he's the only house there.
Yeah, don't you think though? If you're thinking about it, he's full of this, he's gone through this massive disappointment, and I'm sure it still eats him up that he's never had that opportunity to go to Paradise Falls with Ellie, and now he's got all this. Isn't this kind of like a setup for a supervillain more than it is for a protagonist?
Definitely a lot better of a build-up to a supervillain than Megamind.
Probably, yeah, but, it kind of makes me feel like, it's almost kind of nearly on par with, the origin story of the Joker. If you think about it, it's like the only thing I'm missing is that, his skin hasn't bleached and he isn't laughing manically.
Right. I get what you're saying. Now that I think about it, I wouldn't have been surprised if maybe, they would have written his character to be a lot more of a curmudgeon, but maybe, that's not going to appeal to the kids. Let's have him have a little kid sidekick and have him learn more about caring for others. So I actually would have been really intrigued on, what Carl was going through in that course. Like, his wife is dead and his entire neighborhood is being demolished and being taken over by corporate jerks. Mm-hmm. And I think that there is even a Pixar theory of because of course there is, that the corporation that is currently doing this construction is B&L, which is the corporation that Wall-E and is at, with the huge corporation that builds all these things, and then it caused all the major pollution, and then they sent all the people up into space. So yeah, there's actually a theory that the corporation is B&L, and it could be a possibility.
Are you saying, Patricia, that corporations might have evil intentions?
No, of course not.
No, that can't be related to anything in real life, surely not.
I don't think so.
No.
What was I thinking?
Yeah.
But no, seriously. So we have the construction worker played by John Ratzenberger, because of course he is. He's in practically every Pixar movie at this point.
Interestingly enough, though, not having the last say in the film. Because that's kind of that was his kind of thing, wasn't he? He was the underminer in The Incredibles, and he would usually have the last line. I think at that point.
He was let's see, he was also Ham in Toy Story, and He was PT Flea in A Bug's Life. Yeah, he's a lot of characters in Pixar movies. They like to call him, he's the good luck charm of the movies.
Mm-hmm. So obviously, Carl gets into a scuffle, and he ends up whacking one of the workers there because he obviously put his hands on the mailbox, which Carl and Ellie cherish so much. And here's the thing: if you notice, actually, one of the characters bleeds for the first time.
Yes, I was just about to say that. Like, it's shocking because he hit him on the head with a metal cane. And then when you check on his head and you see that it's bleeding, I remember when I first saw this, I was in shock. I think I actually saw this in theaters and everybody was like shocked. It was like, oh my goodness. And, I think I even heard a kid crying. Yeah, it was like a whole bunch of gasp. And then, of course, you go into the courtroom and Carl lost the case. And he's being kicked out of his home and he's being recommended to go over to a nursing home because they think that
can they legally do that?
He's violent.
As far as I'm aware, they own the house. I mean, they can't just kick you off your property, can they? If you're like the sole owner, I don't know. Maybe they were renting it. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. Maybe they were renting it. Maybe they lost the case to the government, to that big corporation, which may or may not be evil. But yeah, it's actually pretty questionable. But yeah, he can no longer live in the house. He has to go over to the nursing home, and so he decides on a plan that he's going to get all of the balloons from his time working at the zoo, and he's going to go over to Paradise Falls. And we see the two men from the nursing home picking him up, saying like it's time to go. And so then he says, I need a few minutes to say goodbye to the old house, and they let him. And then we have all the balloons coming out, and then it floats the house away and he's gone. It's I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if there was a film theory from MadPad on how many balloons would it take for a house that big to be floating away into essentially South America.
Oh my god, there's another guy who's going to be trying to get loads of YouTube hits, and it's going to either end up in his death or I don't know. I see.
Hey, oh yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Yeah, please, internet, don't give us that. It's like it's all right for a Pixar film, but not for real life, please.
Yeah. But yeah, we forgot to mention about the kid who shows up in the beginning of the movie. We forgot to mention about Russell.
Oh yeah.
And so Russell is a little Boy Scout, and he's trying to earn a merit badge. And he goes over to Carl and says, "Good morning, Mr. Frederickson. I need to earn a merit badge, which is to help an elderly person." And Carl is like is not even remotely interested. And so, he just essentially slams the door on him.
I was confused at this because sorry to cut you off. I was confused at kind of his introduction because it made us feel like, wait, was there like some kind of relationship between Carl and Russell before? Because he introduced him
exactly, because he knows his name, and we don't. I mean, it's not like, excuse me, sir. I was wondering if you can help me earn this merit badge. No, it's like they know each other from. They knew each other at some point. Maybe Russell used to live in the same neighborhood as Carl, but then they had to move away because maybe they, the B&L or whatever company like purchased the house for a lot of money, because we do learn a little bit more about Russell's background later on in the movie.
Yeah, it just goes back to what I was saying before. This is the movie that demands a prequel because we need to address these things. So, yeah. So obviously the film. I mean, there's the thing about Russell, because we're so fixated on Carl that he sort of kind of Russell's story has of him trying to earn his badge hasn't really become much of an arc. If you really think about it,
well, I mean, the reason why it doesn't become much of an arc is because he was just there, accidentally. Like, he wasn't. I mean, the whole point of Carl trying to float away is because he wanted to get away from the neighborhood, and then Russell's there, like right there, and he's trying to get himself home, and he can't because He's like thousands of feet up in the air, and Carl wants to get rid of him. And we even, see through his thoughts about how, and it's pretty dark.
Yeah, that's the one thing I'll say about this film. There's a lot, and I mean a lot of darker moments in this film. It's like, you would be very, it's kind of a misleading title by calling it Up when you think about it, at least in an emotional sense. Obviously in a physical sense it is up, because obviously it's a house going up into the sky, but, from an emotional sense and from a psychological sense, it's anything but up, if you think about it,
Right, exactly. It just gets you to see the unexpected. It's like you're not expecting what this movie's going to be about. I mean, you see in the trailers, you see in the promotional posters, and you think it's going to be one thing, but then it completely gives a huge 180. And there's a movie that is a huge example on that, which I'm sure we'll get to at some point. But yeah, you don't expect that this movie has like this sort of dark humor. You think that, it's going to be like all happy and whimsical. And in some cases it does, and then others it's not. And so, we have, Carl and Russell floating into the house, and, they're trying to find out where where Paradise Falls is. And, Russell's talking about like, I know where we're going because I have my little gadget that's going to tell me everything. And then there's this huge storm that starts striking down some of the balloons, and then afterwards, like, it rains really hard, and they're like going off course a little bit, and then eventually they do make it over towards where Paradise Falls is, but it's a long ways away, and Carl is really, really determined to get there, while Russell is kind of like looking at everything, and he's experiencing the outdoors. And, sort of like in the, for the first time in his life, even though that he's a Boy Scout and he has so many merit badges.
Yeah. Well, two things to that. One, Patricia, we're not in Kansas anymore. And two, this is the thing. Isn't it kind of weird that Russell doesn't seem to have any, outdoor experience? Now, he could be, where Carl is in the up world, I guess you could say he's being, totally built up, because he's got a huge corporation surrounding him, but, maybe Russell's in the same situation as well, and maybe he's not had any chance to have, like, any outdoor experience, even though, it's, that needs a bit of explanation, really, because if he's a Boy Scout, and I would imagine that he's, to start with, he does actually still have a couple of badges on him anyway.
He has a lot of badges.
He has a lot of badges, yeah.
It's not like he's some kid who's like, I don't have any badges at all. Because, with the way that he looks, like a bit of a chubby kid, that could have been one of the easiest things to do. But no, he has a ton of badges. And the only badge that he does not have is the helping the elderly badge. He has a badge for everything, but at the same time,
he has now that he's outdoors, experience.
He kind of sucks at being an outdoors kid. I guess we can make the argument about like, it's like you get a badge if you participate, kind of like a participation award even if you lose or something. Or,
but that doesn't really make much sense.
Maybe they're just really, really lax about badges. I have no idea, but I'm actually kind of questioning it.
It doesn't make any sense at all, because like he's got loads of badges all over his sash, and yet he doesn't seem to have much outdoor experience as a scout, which is just really, really confusing to me. Because I thought, here's the thing: I would have gone with Russell. Like, let's say he was like, the lovable loser. He just can't get a badge, but at least there's one badge he can get. And that's helping an old fucker, just like that just came out, but I apologize. But it's like, here's this one badge that he can probably easily get. All he has to do basically is just to get this old guy out of his house and walk him over the street, and there he's got his badge. He's probably like, if they made him like, maybe like he's trying his best, but he's just, I'd say, like one of the characters that Craig Bartlett would create for Hey Arnold. If you think about it,
if he was essentially, if he was Eugene, if he was a Boy Scout or something.
Oh, even better. What if he was like, I guess a mix between. What if it was a mix between Gus and that Boy Scout kid in Recess?
Oh, you're talking about
what's his name?
What you call it?
The Boy Scout kid.
Yeah, not no, but yeah, I know who you're talking about. But yeah, that'd be kind of interesting. That I would like to see that. But yeah, I think that for Gus's character being kind of like a optimistic kid who's experiencing the outdoors for the first time,
Yeah.
it would make a lot more sense if he didn't have a lot of badges or maybe no badges at all, as opposed to somebody who has a ton of badges but absolutely knows nothing about the great outdoors.
I know, it's really strange to me that they would give him that. I really thought they probably would have been better making Russell kind of like, the kid who really craved for a badge but just can't get one, and he has, he's in this city where he can't really go into the outdoors to kind of get them, and and on top of that as well, like, his he throughout the film he talks about how his dad's never around. And like, so you have the point where it's like, oh well, his mum tries his best, but he can't. His mom tries his best, but he can't. She can't do anything for him because obviously, she's on a single income and can't, like maybe do the things that, the expensive things that Boy Scouts would normally do with their family, so they can afford to like send out into, the world. Maybe that's something they could have gone on as well. Like, maybe giving him a bit more sympathy.
For example, I mean, Russell talks about throughout the later parts of the film about how, my dad knows how to put up a tent. My dad knows how to start a fire. And maybe, the reason why he went into Boy Scouts was probably because he wanted to be like his father. Maybe his father was an Eagle Scout, and maybe he wanted to be just like him, and maybe wanted to spend more time with him. But then we learn about that his dad is remarried, and he it doesn't spend as much time with him as much anymore. So maybe if he tries to earn this badge, maybe he'll get his father's approval again. That could have been a great thing to have.
Yeah, and it's like, and then, Carl could have convinced him, look, you shouldn't just do, you should do it for yourself, not just for your dad, not just for your dad's approval. Like, it's
yeah,
like
so what we're trying to say is that there's a lot of good things in this movie, but it just needed to be rearranged to make it even stronger.
Yeah, I just think, thinking about it now, looking back, I wonder if Russell is actually that strong of a character when you think about it.
Not really. There are plenty of side characters in other Pixar movies that are much better.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Russell is a nice kid, don't get me wrong, and he does have a somewhat of a sad backstory, but it's nothing compared to like Dory from Finding Nemo and then eventually Finding Dory, or it's nothing like like Buzz Lightyear, or maybe like Remy from Ratatouille or Linguini. There's a lot of other side characters that are better than Russell, but I can let you know that he is much better than Arlo.
Yeah. So we're introduced then to Snipe, which is the bird that which he is a very funny character, and though I think I guess he's kind of like the Groot of the group, I guess, of characters that were introduced.
So Carl basically tells Russell, look for a snipe, which that's such a trope thing in every single episode of a cartoon that involves with like going out to camp. They always say, look for the snipe. What's a snipe? I don't know, but go look for it. And so he thinks that this giant bird is a snipe, and so he names it Kevin. And they have this wonderful relationship towards one another because Russell has some chocolate, and the bird eats from the chocolate, and the bird actually tries to eat Carl's cane, and then it just spits it out. And he just keeps following him. And then eventually, they want to get rid of the bird because it started to eat the balloons and started to pop out. And then the house just gets a little bit lower, and he tries to tell him to go away. And then afterwards, then the dogs do go away because there's a bunch of dogs around.
Yeah.
One of them being Doug.
Mm-hmm. And so Doug, so they get this dog, and like obviously, like he looks like an all regular dog, and so they ask him to speak, and then he says, "Hi there."
Yes. Hi, my name is Doug, and I love you.
Squirrel. Did they actually tease that in the promotional, like the trailers?
Yes,
and stuff?
they did. I remember seeing this in the trailers, and everybody got a laugh when he said squirrel. So yes, this was in the trailers a lot.
Yeah. So we got Doug, and he is kind of like I'm trying to think if he's your kind of like your good-hearted oafish, I guess, kind of character. Like, he it's like I'm trying to think, he's kind of like, he realizes that he's like in he's in the kind of like the bad guy group, but he's kind of like, he doesn't kind of like realize it. He's kind of like a bit of a goofball. If you think about it.
I mean, he's just told to look for a bird. And the reason why he wants to look for the bird is because he was given a mission by his pack. And the mission is, I need to find a bird so I can take it back to my master. And then he sees that they have Kevin following them. And he's like, can we please have your bird? And then Carl's like, oh, yeah, sure, take him, whatever you want. And then Russell's like, no, don't let Kevin go. And then we have the other dogs coming in. Yeah. And we
Alpha,
have
Beta, and Gamma.
Alpha and the other dogs coming in. And they're essentially trying to do their jobs, which is to find the bird so they can take it back to their master.
Yeah. I want to know, like, the running gag they had with Alpha was that obviously his the voice thing in his collar was obviously was faulty, and so he had basically a high pitched voice like a chipmunk when he had it, and some people got a laugh out of it. I don't know. I didn't. I kind of got it was a bit funny to begin with, and then it kind of got a bit dry as it went along.
Yeah, I was just about to say that. Like, the first second that you hear him speak, it's hilarious because it's a nasty looking dog, and then as time goes on, it's the joke kind of like wears itself thin.
Yeah, wouldn't it have been more? I think it would have been more effective if they'd. Obviously they show that, like, oh hey, your collar's faulty, and then they I don't know, maybe like found a way to fix it, and then obviously then he sounded menacing, and then obviously then you'd have yourself a good antagonist. I think,
or maybe better yet,
wasn't,
what if it becomes like really, really faulty that it switches on to multiple voices?
I guess if it changed with his attitude, not with his attitude, with kind of like his. I guess it was kind of like like one of those. What was those rings that you had when that was supposed to change color?
Yeah, the mood rings. Yeah,
it was kind of like a mood ring.
A certain color that represents that you're in a certain mood.
Yeah, so it would turn red when he's angry, and he'd turn green when he's he's feeling kind of sadistic, I guess, in a way.
Yeah. So maybe
he would be bad and have this voice.
Or maybe he would have this kind of voice if he's trying to think of an elaborate plan or something like that.
Yeah, and he would have this voice if he was your addiction. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. I think that there could have been some more to play around with that, because I can think of so many possibilities. It definitely reminded me a little bit of Dr. Nefarious from the Ratchet and Clank games, in which if he becomes like really faulty, there's a soap opera that plays in his mind, and the only way you would get him back to normal is if like you slap his head. I mean, I don't know if we could do that for a dog, but, just something like funny like that, in which, it's something completely unexpected. It gets you off guard and it makes you laugh.
Well, I mean, obviously this is not Pixar territory, but they kind of tried and did that with the Cat in the Hat, if you remember, with Mike Myers. And remember when he got nailed in the balls, and then all of a sudden he started like playing free flowing, and I think when you saw it being done in that way, I don't think it was. I don't think it would have worked. I don't think.
Good point.
Yeah. So sorry to bring back bad memories for everybody, but that was my reference at the time.
Yeah, but what we're trying to say is that Alpha, the gimmick of him could have been better. I mean, for what it is, it started off pretty funny, and then it kind of just dried off after a while.
Mm-hmm. So, night falls, and Doug and Kevin fall asleep, and Russell struggles to build a tent, and he's unable to do it, and Russell explains to Carl that he's never been camping before, but his divorced father promised Russell he would actually come to his ceremony and be witness him being a senior wilderness explorer. And again, it makes no sense, because, he's got, loads of badges for, doing different stuff. And unless they were just kind of participation awards, I don't know, but again, he's supposed to be this part of this scout camp. He's supposed to be well decorated, and yet he can't put up a tent.
Yeah, exactly. He can't put up a tent. He can't start a fire, and I'm sorry, but for a kid who has so many badges, he should at least learn how to do something. I mean, he's really, really dedicated, and he wants to get all the badges and collect them. I mean, it's not even in something like collecting trading cards or maybe like whatever club or group that you're a part of, you actually have to put some effort into it, and at least you learn something. But then again, maybe that, I mean, I'm currently watching The Worst Cooks in America, and there were these like twin brothers who were part of the Boy Scouts, and they actually did get a merit badge for cooking, and they can't cook to save their life.
No.
So I have no idea. I mean, to be quite honest, I've never been a part of a Girl Scout club or anything that gave away awards or badges. So yeah, I don't know how easy or how difficult it is to earn them nowadays.
Mm-hmm. So Carl wakes up in the morning to find Kevin gone. Russell and Doug are in a panic, and soon they see him on the roof and with a pile of food. Doug explains that he's been collecting food for babies, and which leads Russell to realize that Kevin was a girl this entire time. And so, which I guess, I mean, I don't know, it kind of feels a bit thrown in, really, a little bit. You know, it's like, Kevin has these babies, and now we got to care about that all of a sudden. So
yeah, exactly. It just feels like a plot point that comes completely out of nowhere. I mean, it's kind of like in The Rescuers Down Under, in which you have the kid who's visiting the eagle, and then when he sees the eagle for the first time, he finds out, oh, she has babies. And then we have the hunter, played by George C. Scott, who wants to go after the eagle and the eggs, because he wants to capture them because he's a hunter. So what would have happened if maybe like this kid went to look for a different animal, and then he sees the eagle, and then the eagle has the babies that are waiting to be hatched, and then it just goes like in a completely different direction because we want to create tension, because that's essentially what the tension is in the movie, about this bird and these babies, and to keep them safe, as opposed to like, I'm an old man and I want to go over to Paradise Falls because that's where my wife and I have been wanting to go for at least many, many years. So yeah, that part of the plot point just takes a back seat for a while.
Yeah, it's just it just feels just thrown in for me. So they obviously go off to Kevin calls for her babies, and the faint beeping can be heard. Kevin runs into her babies and leaves. Carl forces Doug and Russell along, leaving the latter depressed. As they're walking, they encounter Alpha, Gamma, and Beta. Doug leaks out that he lost the bird, and the rest of the dogs force Carl and Russell to come along with Doug to their master. And this is where we're introduced to Charles F. Muntz, who was still alive after all this time. And this just feels kind of strange that I don't know how old he was when Carl first idolized him, but I tell you what, he must be like in his 90s, in his 100s.
Yeah, exactly. And you know what? This is one thing that I definitely do agree on the Nostalgia Critic when he did his discussion on this movie, is that you have Charles M. Muntz, who looks like he's in his, I'm gonna guess maybe his mid-20s, early 30s, and we have Carl, who's like a little kid, and then when you see them, they look like they're the same age. So yeah, it's very confusing, and as to how many years apart they are.
It's strange, to say the least.
Yeah,
and,
I mean,
maybe the one thing we could say, maybe the one thing I would probably say is that maybe Ellie died at a very young age for being elderly. Maybe. I mean, like maybe she died like just maybe a couple of months after they retired, maybe, which puts them in the 60s.
I would definitely agree to that statement as well. I would say that, I mean, if we want to play around through ages, I mean, let's see. I mean, I think I did remember that in the beginning of the movie there was mentions about like Carl was 9 years old in the beginning of the movie, and then we can have Charles maybe like in his early to mid 20s. So that's at least maybe like 15-ish years. So let's just say that Carl was in his 70s, then yeah, Charles Muntz should be in his 90s. And I would say that it does look very confusing that we have these two old men who do look like they're similar ages, but one is clearly much older than the other. So yeah, that definitely needs another explanation as to Charles Muntz and what he was doing this, whole time. Again, this would definitely be good for prequel fodder.
Yeah. maybe Charles once took better care of himself than Carl did. Maybe Carl just
Yeah, and you know what? Maybe we can make that argument, but we'll definitely discuss about how maybe that's not a case that we can argue with. But going into when Charles sees Carl and Russell, he brings them over to his ship, his airship. He shows them around to he has like a museum of like rare and animals and their bones, and they have this like nice dining room where they get served food, and it's essentially just him being surrounded by a bunch of dogs. And Carl and Russell are just sitting down and enjoying the food, and Carl is like mesmerized that he's inside the airship, to where he imagined himself being when he was a kid. Like he's essentially being with his idol. And then he talks about the bird. He talks about wanting to capture the bird and wanting them to bring it back because, he wants to show everybody that he was telling the truth. Everybody thought that he was crazy. They didn't believe him. He was basically publicly embarrassed and called a liar. And, ever since then, he's been at Paradise Falls looking for this bird out of revenge. And, I'm sure that, revenge and stress may not be good to a person. I would say that, he probably would be even in worse shape than Carl.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. Is on top of that as well, you can definitely tell that he's been psychologically deranged throughout this time, because when he goes through that sadistic monologue of how explorers are trying to come to find the bird, and he's basically he's saying that he got rid of them all, basically, and so he's like starts knocking over helmets and stuff, and basically saying that he basically knocked them off as they were coming down. So it looks like he basically, from the looks of it, he looks like he's basically lost his mind.
I mean, he was even talking about like there's a lot of people that come here that are very interesting. One is a photographer, one's a news reporter, and he's like knocking down their helmets, and it looks like he may have something to do with their disappearance. And it's like, wow, he's willing to do everything to capture this bird. And then Carl is like, oh man, this guy's a maniac. We have to get out of here. And then we have Russell looking up at the picture of the skeleton of the bird. And then he says, oh, hey, that looks like Kevin, my bird friend. I'm like, shut up. Seriously, don't speak anymore.
Yeah.
Then that's when Charles makes Carl and Russell like his enemies. Like he's willing to capture them so that they can be able to lure the bird over to him.
Mm-hmm. So we get to the point where Kevin hears his baby's crying again. Oh wait, hang on a second. Have I skipped a bit? So they go through this scene where they're trying to escape. And then they do so, and then these soaked dogs return to Muntz, and who reacts angrily. And when the dog is explaining that dog is on Kevin's side, he comes up with an idea to use Doug's tracking device to basically go and try and find them. So meanwhile, Carl and the group think that they're safe. They decide to continue moving with Kevin to the porch of the house. Russell tells Carl that the wilderness is a lot wilder than he thought it would be.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. The wilderness is wild.
Yeah.
Wow.
Even in the Jungle movie, even the kids there had some kind of acknowledgement that where they were in was not a good place. So.
Yeah, and we even made the argument that for people who say that the Jungle movie was the tone was completely out of place because it takes place in a jungle, which, I mean, Arnold's parents, the last known whereabouts was a jungle, and of course that was going to happen. And we did see people reacting bad to it, like, Eugene having an allergic reaction and getting bites, and Rhonda getting her hair loss, and, they actually reacted to the jungle in a very severe way. They knew what they were going against. But here with Russell, it's like, man, being in the wilderness is hard. It's like, geez, you know what? Of course it is. Yeah. I mean, you as a Boy Scout, having all these badges of learning how to put a tent, starting a fire, learning about animals, you would know this kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. And so we get more, dialogue about how Russell, would get brought to Fenton's ice cream, and they would sit on the curb and count the number of blue and red cars and stuff, and it's more of like how his dad's not spending so much time with him and stuff, and that's there. So Kevin hears the babies cry for help and dart towards them in the cave. Suddenly, a spotlight falls on Kevin, and Munt's airship has followed her, and then she gets captured. But when they try and save her, Munt sets fire to the house, and so then Carl gives up trying to get Kevin back, and tries to put out the fire, and ends up having to give away giving away the bird, and so that ends up being our kind of our conflict between our two characters, between Carl and Russell. And I don't know, it wasn't as, it felt a bit forced, this, the getting these two to kind of conflict with each other, if you ask me.
Yeah, because we already know why Carl was in Paradise Falls in the first place, because he wanted to be at the place where his wife was. It just so happens that Russell, was there accidentally, and then he just got himself into this bad situation. In a sense, we could argue that it was Russell's fault that Carl was into this predicament, because, if it wasn't for Russell, then maybe the bird wouldn't be following them. And if the bird wasn't following them, then maybe they wouldn't be, they wouldn't be captured by Charles Muntz, and they wouldn't be getting themselves into severe trouble. So, the fact that, Russell is telling him, we have to go back for Kevin, Kevin needs us. And then Carl's like, no, this bird has caused too much trouble as it is. And, sure. You could make the argument that, yeah, you want to save a bird. The bird needs some help. And yeah, it's just causing a lot more trouble for Carl, because most of his balloons have been popped out by Charles's, I think it was his gun, and now he barely has any air left to maneuver his house so he can be able to float it up to where he needs to go. And so he gets really, really frustrated. He didn't want any part of this. He was essentially a loner, and he didn't want anybody to bother him. But now that we have Russell there bothering him, it just makes him really upset, and just essentially tells him to go away and leave him alone. Yeah. And so Russell does that, and then we see Carl continuing to struggle to go over to the hills in Paradise Falls, and he has absolutely no remorse towards the bird's safety or towards Russell for a while.
He has no reason to do so, because he felt like he just fell off.
No, he has absolutely no reason for that.
Yeah.
He didn't really care for the bird in the first place. It was all Russell.
Yeah, and then we finally get to the point where Carl actually does get to the falls, and Russell throws his sash in the ground in anger, and goes off to try and rescue Kevin on a leaf blower. And I'm just thinking throwing that sash on the ground, it's I don't want it any longer. It's you've not even done anything to earn it. If you really think about it, how useless has he been in this whole adventure? When you think about it.
Yeah, if anything, he's caused more problems.
Yeah, it's I know we're saying
again. I think this will be a lot more justified if he had no badges, or if he had maybe one or two, as opposed to a kid who had multiple badges.
Yeah, if you turn around and says, forget the badge, I don't care. I'm just gonna basically, let's say for example he had become fixated on the badges, and then finally he found a reason to say, it's not about the badges anymore. It's about doing what's right, and then going off to go find Kevin. There'd be some strength to that, but there's no strength.
Yes,
here.
Absolutely, there would be some strength to that.
Yeah.
That would give Russell a purpose as to becoming determined to doing something for himself for once, as opposed to I want to earn these badges so I can make my dad proud.
This might sound incredibly cruel.
I think that there could have been some slight tweaking in this.
Yeah, this might sound incredibly cruel, but Buzz Lightyear has more believability as a space ranger than Russell does as a believability as a Boy Scout. I'm sorry.
You can make a huge argument about that, because we already saw it from the first two movies. There's the Buzz Lightyear animated series, so there is justification to why Buzz Lightyear is a stronger space ranger, even though that he's a toy, as opposed to Russell, who's a Boy Scout, who has a lot of badges, but absolutely sucks at being a Boy Scout.
I know. Russell is a badly written character in this. in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, and it sucks too because there's a lot of potential for this character.
Yeah, there was. So, I mean, we get to the point where Carl goes through a montage of how, again, this also feels a bit like, they're trying to make us feel like, he's, he should feel bad about the situation he's in, and he's not happy that he's there and stuff like that. And then he flips through the pages of the book, the adventure book that him and Ellie have been putting together over the years. And, he's worried about going on to the next page because he feels like it's just going to be nothing in it. And then he realizes it's their life in its entirety of the adventure that they've been on pretty much. And then it ends with them basically saying, thanks for the adventure, now go have a new one, love Ellie. And that is an emotional moment, that on its own. And
I love that moment. It's so great. When you take from the intro of the movie all the way up into that scene in which they were happy together, it wasn't about traveling. It wasn't about going out to different places. Just them two alone, going through the experiences of being a couple, going into work and trying to live normal lives. That was all that Ellie wanted. She wanted to be with somebody to have these experiences with. And for her, that was enough.
Yeah. It's just too bad that it's the motivation to make Carl throw everything out of his house and go and save this Boy Scout, which we never really could root for in the first place. So, so that bit was great, but the follow-on after that is just, then
then they try to be like one of those action moments with the dogs and the airplane, and you have these two old men fighting each other so that because at this point in the movie you have Charles capturing the bird and it's locked up in a cage, and so you have Carl trying to set it free, and then Russell tries to save it, but of course he screws up.
Oh yeah. What was the plan here when you think about it for Charles Muntz? What, to go back with it?
He was planning on going back with it to prove that, he wasn't crazy. But I like to make the argument that with the way that, with how old he is, I wouldn't be surprised if the people that he wanted to prove his discovery are already dead.
Probably, yeah. The boy might, the minute he lands, he's like, hey, I found this bird. It's like, okay, you're under arrest for, crossing various borders and bringing an exotic bird into the United States, assuming it is in the United States. And then maybe
there'll be some people who are like, who are you?
Yeah.
It's like, I'm Charles F. Muntz. Who? I'm this explorer, adventures out there, and they'll be like, who the hell is this old guy with this bird?
So
I find that this plan is kind of, you know what? It would be so interesting if, maybe he does come back with the bird and then he doesn't get any fanfare. That would be kind of interesting to see, actually.
Yeah, it'd be kind of like, he looks so defeated. It's like, okay, you want this bird, then, fair enough, go, take it. It's like, and
then maybe he has, the bird and he doesn't know what to do with it.
Yeah, I don't know. But thankfully, we didn't go that route. We went the action. That airplane dog scene is something out of. There's no other way of comparing it really to anything else.
I mean, it's something like out of Looney Tunes or Tom and Jerry.
It looks weird and stupid.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you have the dogs chewing on the little bone to shoot out bone bullets, and it just looks so weird. Yeah. Nowhere in the movie was there sure, I can suspend my disbelief of a collar that you can understand what the dogs are saying, but dogs flying on airplanes. That's like that painting with the dogs playing cards.
Yeah.
So it's like that in a sense. It's just so weird that it doesn't really make sense in the universe that they're at.
I know. It's other things. Well, let me safely say this: I'm a huge fan of Star Fox. As some people know, the Nintendo franchise, and some people kind of make fun of me, believing that a fox, a rabbit, a falcon, and a toad can fly spaceships through space. Yeah, tell me you don't look at this scene and like it with any type of dignity, and say that what I believe is what I like is
I mean,
any
just
less.
looking at it, I'm expecting like Charles Muntz to say, "Do a barrel roll," or Alpha saying, "Hey Einstein, I'm on your side."
Yeah, yeah. So that was something. And then we get obviously Carl lands on the airship and gets in and has that standoff with Charles Muntz. And again, they do look like they are the same age, and they even fight like they're the same age as well.
Yeah, exactly. Now it's kind of funny because this movie came out in 2009. Now, around that same year, there was a better fight that had two old men duking it out. We had Liquid Ocelot and Solid Snake in Metal Gear Solid 4, and that fight was much better.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, there was also, there's one fight that was even more comical as well, which is in Family Guy. That's, who's that, old pedophile guy, and then that Nazi.
Yeah, Herbert the pedophile.
Herbert the pedophile, and then he fought and that was a fun.
Chris, I come into my place in the basement.
Even they had a more fun old man fight.
Yeah, exactly.
And
but get your fat ass over here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but that was actually also a lot of fun. Although probably for some people they say that Peter versus the chicken was a lot more fun. But yeah, exactly. But what I'm trying to say is that it just feels kind of like weird that we have these two old men fighting each other for a bird.
Yeah, it's a pretty valuable bird, and for that, because obviously Carl, for whatever reason, has some kind of interest now in getting the bird back to its babies, and Charles Muntz wants to send it back to a country which probably has long forgotten him. There's nothing to root for here, really, when you think about it. It's just basically you're just kind of along for the ride.
We need to get the bird back to safety, and we even have Russell have his like little moment in which he helps Carl by getting the airship to go in opposite directions, and getting we have Charles kind of like going off into the side, and then another dark moment is that he falls to his death with only a handful of balloons.
Yeah. And so he's like, because he gets caught on the on the windowsill, doesn't he? Trying to get. He also gets caught in some of the balloons as well.
Yeah.
And then he just he does fall to. And mind you, it's interesting though, because they left him with those balloons, and I don't know. It's like, were they like insinuate? I thought at one moment, looking at that, it was kind of confusing for me, because it's like, does that mean he's gonna does that insinuate that he's gonna use the balloons to slow down his fall and he'll live?
Yeah. I mean, he was like hoping that, if I just grab a lot of these balloons, it's going to slow down my fall, make it like a parachute. But no, it doesn't work in this case. I guess we can make the argument that a lot of these balloons have lost their helium. I mean, how long has Carl been at Paradise Falls? Like maybe 3 or so days? Yeah. So a lot of the air has deflated since then. So yeah, it's not going to help much for Charles to grab a bunch of balloons so he can float down, not needing to worry about falling all the way. But no, it's not that case at all.
There is a bunch of theories that go around about how Pixar villains didn't actually die, or didn't actually nothing happened to them. For example, have you seen the theory that Syndrome, when he blows up in the jet airliner when he gets caught, so there's the theory going around that the explosion happened, but he managed to stop the propeller blade with his 0 point energy blast before the explosion happened, and he was able to escape or something like that. Yeah, there's some theory about that at the moment, but and on top of that, there's theories of how bad guys seem to get out of these situations somehow, and I don't know why they. So basically, it leaves an interesting prospects open, but likely we're going to see an Up sequel is going to be pretty minimal at this point, I probably imagine.
Yeah, I mean, if we did have an Up sequel, I mean, what's there left to do? So I guess we can go over to the ending. So
yeah, so we
have the next couple of days, and we have Russell going into the scout meeting, and he is earning his badge, and then we have Carl, who's there, and he presents him with a bottle cap, and he says, "I now give you the Ellie badge," and and yeah, he looks really happy and he gives him a hug. And then at the end, we see them like sitting down and they're just eating ice cream and they're calling out the cars. And we see that the house is now at Paradise Falls, landing exactly where he wanted it to be.
So then we get the credit scene, and it's that it's the new adventure book of them going into like new adventures and stuff, and it's a nice sweet way to end it. And yeah, I think I can kind of understand going, after we talked out the second and third act, why people kind of like cling on to the first act and say that's probably the best part of the film and probably the only enjoyable part of the film, I guess.
Or at least the Carl and Ellie parts were the best part of the film.
Yeah.
The Carl and Russell parts and the Carl and Charles Muntz parts are a bit mixed.
So at the end of all this, it did about I tell you what, it did actually do very well at the box office. It did over $700 million. At box office.
Yeah, and also it received like 5 Academy Award nominations.
So yeah, it was. It's definitely up there with some of the big ones. But, I mean, for us, we just think, after you kind of like, I would say it kind of it has kind of the same flaws as like, I wouldn't say as badly as Frozen, I would say. I mean, but you can definitely, once you let it age for a while, you kind of like, you can kind of see how old it actually is.
Yeah. It's kind of like Avatar, in which, the movie is so amazing, so breathtaking with its effects. Wait a couple of years, and now pretty much nobody cares about it anymore. Even with the announcement of with James Cameron saying, I'm going to make Avatar 2, 3, and 4, and everyone's like, I don't care.
Because every other movie looks like that now.
Exactly. Every other movie looks like that. It's like, it makes you laugh thinking that, James Cameron took 10 years to do Avatar because he wanted to wait for the graphics to look good. Now that he's taking probably another 10 years for that, pretty soon every movie's going to look like that and nobody's going to care. It's like, it seems that spectacle is one thing to impress an audience, but a story with great characters and moving moments, it's what makes it stay forever.
So, moving back to Up, we should probably score it. And so, I guess I do enjoy the prospect of these characters, I would say, and I do enjoy like the setup. And so, I'd probably say give it a 7. I would say.
Yeah, I would give it maybe a 7.5 because I do know what they're trying to do. I do see the potential for this story and these characters. There's a lot to build on. There's just some things that are a bit stumbly that you wish that could have been tightened up, but then there are things that are good, are amazing, especially the Carl and Ellie moments. It really, really is the best part of this movie, and it's memorable because of that particular reason. Their time as a couple, their interactions with each other are so phenomenal. You wish that the movie would have been more about them.
And so, that ends another PixMix. And so, just to let everybody know about the schedule, I mean, it's basically come to the point now where we're just going to try and do PixMix whenever we can, and then it'll just randomly appear when you least expect it. So, I guess it kind of falls into the randomization of PixMix, I guess, the way we're going to be doing the schedule
but
now.
The bright side is that we do have about 4 months, so we do have some time left until we reach over to The Incredibles 2.
Yep. So, from myself, Arun.
And Patricia.
Take care, and bye-bye for now.
See you later.